honestly wake up at like 9 or 10, and then like I'd be good to go for the evening. And, I mean, I work at the airport, so my days off are different. But as soon as I get in
We're live.
position,
We are
I'll be good.
We're on the internet, folks.
So,
That's not to say like shut up or anything. I'm just saying. We're on the internet.
Anything you can say or do will be used against you.
Oh no.
Oh, we've got recordings and proof.
Oh no. Nobody do anything sketch.
Yeah. Probably about time to start. Well, welcome everybody. So glad to have all you here. What is it? For those of you who have come for the first time, we've been going through James and a bit of it's a small book but chock full of good stuff. Today we're going to be going through chapter 4 and some additional passages on top of that. And I usually like starting things off with a question. So today I wanted to ask you guys about personality and characteristics of people. And regarding that, like, what kind of personalities or characteristics do you guys struggle getting along with?
Struggle getting along with.
Or like
I have a really hard time with arrogant people.
Yeah.
With really arrogant people, especially people who are arrogant and incompetent.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because it's like they're so full of themselves, obviously, and they're so sure that they're good at what they're doing, and when it's obvious that they're not, and I struggle with like getting along with those people because I just want to like tear them down. And
there's definitely a bit of that beats you over the head when it comes to IT.
oh yeah, and Emil can probably verify that too.
Yeah. I'm lucky that most of my clients don't know a lot about computers, but most of them are nice. But when they're like attacking you and also blatantly wrong, it's just like, all right.
I have a hard time with people who are like, I don't know, they're careless of rules and structure that's like good rules and structure. Like, I'm not talking about things where it's like everyone can agree, like, no, that's kind of dumb, like, we're not doing that. But things that are in place that are just, they make sense, and they're like, they feel they're the exception to the rule, and so they're just going to do what they want, and like, I don't know how people live like that. I don't understand. It's like, why? Why are you like this? It bothers me because it's a disregard for something that like is important or makes sense, but then it also like can cause harm to the people around them, depending on what the structure is. Mm-hmm. So that bothers me.
For me, it's probably entitled people.
Oh,
I can't, especially my line of work is the people that feel more entitled are the people that less deserve the things and the more demanding. So it's very hard to be. You can still be nice and polite, but it takes an extra effort on my part to. Then I want to slap them.
I'll agree with her. Honestly, the hardest part of my job, for those of you that don't know, I'm Casey, by the way. I'm new, but I work at the airport full time. But part of my job is to handle any kind of like celebrity or high profile client that comes in for an escort. So I deal with a lot of the entitlement. Oh, I'm this X person. I deserve this treatment. And so that's really difficult for me when they come in with like their $3,000 like luggage and they're like, okay, you're gonna carry my bag, but you're gonna have to carry it this way. Don't let it touch the ground. And like, yeah, it gets really bad.
Yeah.
And when they have to take off their shoes in TSA, they make me put on they brought their own gloves for me to wear to handle their shoes. And that's been a fun one because of COVID, you guys. They're like, well, you need to put on gloves and then put on these
They
gloves.
have more of an excuse to do that. Yeah.
Oh, and then here's like 6 Germ-X wipes.
Yeah.
Make sure your fingernails are clean, too. When are you working at an airport? You're on germ-infested places. But anyway, yeah. So the entitlement thing is probably the biggest.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
I think that I think this is more of just a flaw in myself, but interacting with people, especially when I first meet them, that aren't like overly enthusiastic, I guess.
Oh.
Like if I give them a compliment, they're like, thanks. Like I don't.
I already knew that.
Or like if I'm like, I don't know, it just seems like at least the way that I communicate a lot of times I try to be a little like over polite and stuff like that so that I can make people feel more comfortable. And I know it's not somebody's like, it's not bad for somebody to just say exactly what they think, like the way, like they're just presenting exactly what they think and how they feel about it. But like it just makes me feel a little bit uncomfortable sometimes and like I'm doing something wrong. But I think that's just because I'm kind of a really sensitive person. So it can just be hard for me to get along with those people sometimes.
So people that don't like yes and
Yeah.
they'll like just like let's end the conversation. Yeah, I understand.
It makes it extra hard because yeah, exactly. You put in a bit of effort and it's just like yeah.
You get nothing.
Yeah. Like occasionally, when talking about like interacting with people, especially in church, it's just like from time to time, there are people more nervous or something like that, and they just kind of thanks, and you can see them like actively moving away and stuff like that. Like okay. I think kind of along the line, for me, like along the lines of like the arrogance and the entitled and stuff like that is like one thing that kind of ruffles me is when I get to someone who is kind of socially domineering kind of thing. Like they always got to be like on top of the like conversation and stuff like that to like sometimes what seems like an unhealthy amount like I can get through the conversation, but it does get me on the defensive a little bit. Anybody else want to share one?
Or I really don't like people that are like kind of like really hypocritical. That just really gets me a lot.
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
Yeah, that definitely gets me.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely.
I think it's even worse when like they're hypocritical, but they're like subtle about it,
Oh yeah.
and you're like, oh, I thought we were like friendly. I thought
Oh,
you were
yeah.
nice. I thought you were this. But then it's like much later you found out, oh, they like talk badly about me, or like they,
Yeah.
to my face they're like lovely, but to everybody else they think I'm like awful.
Yeah.
Those are the worst.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Okay, so yeah, thank you everyone for all your responses and stuff like that. I think we can all empathize with a bit what we've been talking about. But we're going to go ahead and start our reading in James 4, and we're going to read through 1 through 12. What causes fights and quarrels among you? Don't they come from your desires that battle within you? You desire, but do not have, so you kill. You covet, but you cannot get what you want, so you quarrel and fight. You do not have because you do not ask God. When you ask, you do not receive, because you ask with wrong motives, that you may spend what you get on your own pleasures. You adulterous people, don't you know that friendship with the world means enmity against God? Therefore, anyone who chooses to be a friend of the world becomes an enemy of God. Or do you think Scripture says without reason that he jealously longs for the Spirit he has caused to dwell in us? But he gives us more grace. That is why Scripture said, God opposes the proud and shows favor to the humble. Submit yourselves then to God. Resist the devil, and he will flee from you. Come near to God, and he will come near to you. Wash your hands, you sinners. Purify your hearts, you double-minded. Grieve, mourn, and wail. Change your laughter to mourning, and your joy to gloom. Humble yourselves before the Lord, and he will lift you up. Brothers and sisters, do not slander one another. Anyone who speaks against a brother or sister, or judges them, speaks against the law and judges it. When you judge the law, you are not keeping it, but sitting in judgment on it. There is only one lawgiver and judge, the one who is able to save and destroy. But who are you, who are you to judge your neighbor? So today, I wanted to focus a lot on the ideas of judgment and our own struggles with judgment and like all the kinds of different people we meet. I think it's pretty clear that like judgment comes from either how some people act or what they do. But in the beginning, we're told like not to judge like a lot in the Bible, and like there's good reason for that. But in the beginning, it's very hard, and I want to look into this perspective of where a lot of sin comes in, like before that is the temptation. There's times where we like are struck with situations with anger or jealousy, but what locks it in with the sin is what we ultimately end up doing it and how we address it. And I want to look at like judgment in the same way, is with judgment, there's also impressions that come before that, and I think one way or another we're gonna get that from people because impressions come from anyone doing anything, kind of thing. So you know like many other sins, there will always be a temptation for judgment and the feelings and the impressions to work through. But where judgment is really locked in is once again how we address those feelings, where it comes from how we end up defining other people, how we, especially when it comes to the slander, the gossip. That's something that like we may all have like a little bit of weakness for, not necessarily in a malicious way, but occasionally we'll come across a person that really pushes our buttons and our feelings just kind of out to certain people, kind of thing. But again, when thinking of judgment, like that's where the real like consequence comes, is when we start spreading or defining a person in a present moment, thinking like they can't get better, this is what they are, kind of thing. And there's two primary ways I want to think about like addressing the impressions. First off, if we like our time in the church, if we come across people with more serious action like that we know is sin and stuff like that, it can be difficult, but I think we need to work to address them directly before we go about warning everyone about this person, or even if it's something like that we feel we need someone more equipped for it, maybe bring along one person. But when it's either a sinful action, or when something like someone hurts you emotionally, they may not know what they're doing. So like I think it's a big thing to like take the time to process it and deliver it to them in a way that's like not necessarily just like a toxic gossip or an explosion. And the other part of it is like when it comes to the little personality quirks, like stuff that like may like grind our gears a bit, but like may not be necessarily something so heinous in the beginning. We need to take the time to process and observe that person in their entirety. The next part I want to look at is Matthew 7:1-5. Do not judge, or you too will be judged. For in the same way You judge others, you will be judged. And with the measure you use, it will measure to you. Why do you look at the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye and pay no attention to the plank in your own eye? How can you say to your brother, let me take the speck out of your eye, when all the time there is a plank in your own eye? You hypocrite. First take the plank out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eye. You know, as Luke said, you know, hypocrisy can be a very aggravating and hurtful thing, but I want to tie that all into preemptive judgment within our congregation, within the people we come across, you know. Like, we've talked about this a lot, especially with the series of COVID events that have happened, but, you know, I think a lot of us have experienced, like, dips in community, dips in involvement, or, like, different levels of effort. And, you know, there can be times where that really beats us down as well. So I want us to be careful about preemptive judgment. Judgment in a state of a relationship, a state of a community, or a state of service. Whether it be from the group or what we know of a person or what we know of a community, even before we get into it, kind of thing. Or, you know, the day-to-day with song leading or lessons or anything like that. How fast have we come to make a judgment call on those things? How fast have we let certain things influence us before we dive into it ourselves? Like, have we judged an environment before even getting into it? Like, it can be upsetting when certain relationships with friends don't work out or people dwindle. But there may be times we need to ask, what have we done for that connection? What efforts have we made? And, like, sometimes that may be harder than we think, because, like, you know, sometimes we don't think of ourselves as doing this specific task, being the glue, being the leader. But, you know, yes.
I kind of want to go with that back to kind of what we read first about judging with the wrong motives, judging people. And I think with individuals and in our community, something I'm learning and something that's coming to my attention more recently, when I'm asking myself, like, why am I upset about this? Why am I judging this? Usually I think we get very defensive when someone strays from the norm of what we feel like Christianity is, because we feel like we've given up so much. As a community, as a church, we're supposed to give up so much and live a certain way. And when someone is struggling to live the way we feel like we should all live, and we've given up and been humbled to this point, we judge them because it's like, well, you failed me because we're all supposed to be doing this. And that's one of those,
I did it.
I
Why
did
can't
this, you should be doing it too. Like, I gave up this, you should be giving this up too. It shouldn't be a struggle for you. And I think that goes with those wrong motives and that selfishness where it's like, I feel like you should support me and, like, the sacrifices I've made by making those same sacrifices.
Yeah.
And I think on the other hand, like, the thing that goes hand in hand with that is usually we ourselves we haven't searched scripture, we haven't strengthened our own faith enough to deal with some form of variant in our way of thinking, where you haven't formed a strong opinion on how you should treat someone who sinned this way or who has chosen to live this way. And because you don't know how to deal with it and you don't know how to approach it in good conscience, you strike out against the other person. So
more importantly, you don't know how to approach them with love and grace.
Right. And so, that's the speck and the plank, and that's the selfish motives and things talking, but it's easier to justify ourselves in that circumstance because we feel like we've done everything right, and because of what they've chosen, they've caused a problem. When really it's real you who haven't prepared yourself to love those people when they do choose something different or when they're struggling.
Yeah. I mean, that's a huge point, and like, I guess kind of like going a little more into that is like sometimes there is a bit of a fear in the defense kind of thing. Is like, a while back, my youth minister had this analogy of like someone standing on a chair and both trying to pull the other, and of course the person on the chair got pulled down a lot more easy kind of thing. So like, from time to time it can be scary when we think there's something like harming our faith, not to just be like, gotta protect myself kind of thing. But there are those situations, like Gabby said, with love and grace, where I think for a lot of people it does mean so much to just listen, to understand where they've come from, what they've dealt with in their life. And of course, we need to hold on to scripture, and if we study enough, it does have the answers, like, to our lives, to the struggles of many people, and like there is so much purpose for every step of it. But there are people at different points in their lives, and again, such a big thing for judgment is humbling ourselves. As it said in the first passage we read, 4:10, humble ourselves before God and He will lift you up. And I think that humility is the key to so much aspects of this judgment.
Well, and I just to interrupt again, but I love the next verse even more so than verse 10.
Mm-hmm.
Brothers and sisters, do not slander one another. Anyone who speaks against a brother or sister or judges them speaks against the law and judges it. When you judge the law, you're not keeping it, but sitting in judgment on it. You have this bit of scripture just sort of highlighting the absurdity of a sinner judging another sinner. And but on top of that, there's like an echo here of like the greatest commandment, right? Like, love God, love everybody else, right? And when you are speaking against a brother or sister, and all you're doing is trying to speak against them, and all you're doing is trying to judge them without any sort of like humble presence in that, or trying to approach them with whatever you think might be wrong, you're violating that commandment. Yeah. And that's what I think this is saying here in verse 11. If you slander one another, you're not loving one another, and that is a very serious. Like, God takes that so seriously, and so do all of the apostles in the scriptures. They take that. It's a fundamental, literally the second most important law. Yeah. And if you are violating that, you're just as bad, if not worse, than whatever you're judging that person for.
I guess I'm curious how everybody kind of handles that process of approaching people or judging, because obviously there are scriptures that say this is right, this is wrong, and so if someone is doing the thing that's wrong, we're immediately like, well, we are entitled spiritually to judge that. But I'm just curious of people's process. Like, do you stop and ask, like, okay, can I love them first and like keep that relationship going and then talk to them about it, or do I just go? Can I just go and start talking to them about the problem and then reaffirm that, like, I love them? You know what I mean?
I think, I'm sorry, you want to go first, please?
Oh, no, you can go first.
So just recently, I've encountered, one of my really close friends has actually asked me, because for them, it's very hard to understand how I can have friends in the world super close to me. I mean, these people are hardcore. I would die for them. That kind of friendship, right? And in their Christian walk, they don't understand how I can differentiate being a Christian because some of them don't follow any religion. So not that they're bad people, they're not at all, but they definitely, one doesn't believe in any entity at all. So I don't know necessarily that they're atheists, but she just doesn't correlate, to anything. She respects my views and so on. So what Nelly was saying is, for me, it's very difficult to not show them who I am. That from the get go, people just know this is what I believe in, this is what I stand, and there's going to be things that we're not going to agree on. But if you respect my view and I respect yours, if it's a true sin that's now like affecting me in my Christian walk, then I definitely will let go of that person, because nothing and no one is worth my salvation. But that's for me to determine. If I can be the Christian that I say to be and still stand 100% in my walk and be friends with these people, I pray that my behavior eventually will influence in any little way that they might come to know God. But it's very difficult. I probably would friend them first and try to address the situation versus just coming in hot and then see how that works. That's just me. Okay.
So you bring up a good point. I really struggle with this sometimes, telling people this, because people will, like Luke said, be hypocritical of me. So fellow Christians that find out are like, how can you work for these people? So my bosses are married to each other. They're both women and they're married to each other, which is homosexuality, right? So, and then that's like one of the biggest hot topic items that a Christian goes after. It's like, oh well, you're gay, you're gonna go to hell. It's like, no, we don't need to approach people like that. That is the completely wrong way to approach somebody. And people are like, how can you stand to, like, I literally had one of my best friends in the world tell me the other day that's Christian, how can you stand to work for someone that is in such sin? And I was like, well, let's put it this way. Like you said, I have people in my friend circle that don't believe in God that I would take bullets for. Because, like, they've been my friends since high school. And people are like, well, why are you still friends with them? And I'm like, well, like Maria said, like, unless they're constantly, like, dragging me down to where they are or dragging me into sin, I see no reason to not be friends with them. I would want to be friends with them. So, like, my influence and my behavior can come off and we can have those conversations of where they're at. And I can slowly lead you to God without shunning you away by instantly coming out and saying, oh, well, you live this way, you're going to go to hell. Because, and like, I know that's really strong language, I'm sorry, but it's the truth. Like,
we've heard it. I mean, we've heard people behave like that.
That's like, I've literally walked into a local church, and then walked back out the door because they judged one of my family members because of something they've either done in the past or just the way they were. And I'm like, well, that's my blood, that's my family. Well, they're that way, you shouldn't allow them to do that. Well, that's not me, brother, sister, whoever I'm talking to. That's not me. All I can do for that person is show them what I believe and what I believe to be true. Right. And then it is up to you to follow and find your own belief. Because I can guarantee you, out of however many people are in this room, not all of us believe the exact same way. Even if you are married to one another, you do not believe the exact same way. You do not believe the exact same set of beliefs that come out of the Bible. You find your own belief. No one told us to believe in God, right? Now, our parents might have when we were little. Oh, God is real. Jesus is real. But eventually, you come to an ultimatum, a climax of whether you are going to continue to believe, to find your own belief, to mask out and find your own belief.
I think about, and I'm really thankful for what you just shared, because I think that's really appropriate and really important for more of our fellow Christians to hear. I really think about the example that Jesus set for us, right? Like, when was Jesus the most angry? He was the most angry at, like, the Pharisees, right? The Sadducees, the people who went around saying, oh, you're condemned, you're wrong, you're the bad person. He was the most angry at those people. Who did he show the most compassion and love to?
The sinners.
The sinners. He time and time again, consistently chose to have dinner with them,
Right.
He chose to associate with them. He chose to reach out and touch them when nobody else would. And for us, what example would we rather set? The one of the Pharisees where like Jesus is like actually furious with us, or the one that says, okay, well you might be full of sin, or you might be living with some sin, but guess what? I am too. And there is nothing that should stop me from, assuming no like physical danger comes to me or anything, but even then, there's nothing that should stop me from loving you, from doing my best to help you, to help guide you as best as I can, to be a helping hand if that's what you're asking for. That's the example that Jesus wants for us.
And truly, from what Gabby's saying, the Bible has equipped us with everything we need, because even to our brothers and sisters in the church, if it comes to a point where now the congregation is suffering because of somebody's behavior, the Bible says to just kind of like pretend like they don't even exist. There's things that get there, but sometimes we want to skip all those steps and just be like, whatever, you're sinning, and
Right.
we are all
Right.
sinners. By the grace of God, it is that we're saved, and it is a daily thing that we have to take that again and say, today I'm going to follow Jesus. Today I'm going to follow Jesus. Because the day that we say, you know what, I'm going to take a break, who knows what's going to happen? You might never come back, or that might be the day that he comes, or you die, whichever. But yeah, like Abby said, I agree with what Gabby indicated.
And if I could just wrap a bow on that to hand it back to Paul, and what you said about like skipping all of those steps and going straight to the condemnation, that's literally what the judgment is all about. This idea that we shouldn't be judging each other directly. It's us sort of jumping the gun, because we're not the ones who are supposed to judge. It's only God who's the one who's supposed to judge. And for us to skip all of those steps along the way, every part that says we need to be loving, we need to be kind, we need to assist where it's necessary, we need to rightfully point out things that are wrong without necessarily condemning the person. If we skip all of those parts and jump straight to condemnation, we have tried to put ourselves at the level of God, and that's not what we are supposed to do. And that puts us in that position of judgment that we aren't supposed to have.
Absolutely. Thank you so much all for your input on this. Like, it's absolutely true that skipping to like condemnation and all that is, yeah, it's not the way to go about anything. And as far as like interacting with people in the world, interacting with our fellow Christians, like, it's so important to recognize that there is good in everybody. There is intention, there is life to help us better understand them. Of course, we need to stay with the scriptures because they do guide us to a righteous life. But, helping us understand others gets us there. And our humility of, I think something that's so powerful, whether it be just making an effort to connect with people, making an effort to do a service or anything, just saying, this is something I struggle with. It is. And still making an effort to do it. I think that says so much to everyone, and I think that's where the big humility comes in, is like understanding that we are on a journey as well. It's not about putting up our shields against every little person who does everything wrong, like even in the church or whatnot. We're in this together. 416, youth group, the church as a whole, we are in this together. And the last point I wanted to make is just a small verse about protecting ourselves from judgment, or learning how to deal when others are judging us. It's Galatians 1:10. Am I now trying to win the approval of human beings or of God? Or am I trying to please people? If I were still trying to please people, I would not be a servant of Christ. Unfortunately, we are all flawed people, and I pray we're all making our own efforts. But we will come across people, even in the church, who judge us, and that can hurt. But again, it goes back to not only humbling ourselves, but submitting ourselves to God and understanding that His word is truth. And the more we take time to dive into it, to understand everything it has to offer, we can slowly dissipate the judgment, and we can slowly understand what's important to reach people, what's important to address in others and ourselves. And we can get a clear picture on that. So that's all I got for today. We ran kind of long for like the
That's
for like
good
the
though. That's
first
okay.
time.
A couple of announcements though, guys, before we wrap up. No, leave it on. A couple of announcements. First things first. This Saturday is your wedding shower.
Oh yeah.
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 Paul and Jaden are getting married, and their wedding shower is this Saturday. It's for everybody, men and women. It's from 2 to 4 right here at the Fellowship Hall, I believe. Yes. It's a come and go. So if you can show up, great. If you can't, that's fine too. But there's more details in the bulletin about that. Oh, hi, internet. And then the 22nd, the next Sunday is our combined class with youth group.
Yes.
So we will not be up here next Sunday. We will be in the annex with the teens because we have a combined class with them.
This is next Sunday.
Next Sunday,
Okay,
correct.
got it.
Yep. And Paul's going to be leading that. And as well, the Saturday after that, the 28th, it's a spiritual discipline day, and it's being hosted by the youth group, but it's open to youth group families to 416, and they are going to be going up to the lava tubes in Flagstaff, and that's super fun. If you've never been to the lava tubes, it's absolutely a really, really great time. So there are flyers here. You can register at mesachurch.org/events, or on the Church Center app. You can look on the events tab, and you can register to be a part of that. It is free, but they just need to know a head count to make sure they know who's coming. I think Janelle and I are going to be there. But believe me, if you've never been to the lava tubes, it's amazing down there. It's like just complete darkness, and it's like 30-something degrees year-round. So if it's hot and you want to get out of that and you want to just climb down into a hole and go into a cave and be like in complete and total darkness, it's really cool. A lot of fun. So yeah, there are flyers here if you guys need that. And yeah, that's everything. Thanks.